Dmitri pulled up to the Medusa restaurant in his SUV and, before getting out, spent several minutes carefully observing who was entering and exiting the place. He was clearly interested in the clientele visiting this establishment. Shrugging as if drawing some conclusion, he stepped out of the car and headed towards the glass entrance door. Standing nearby was a doorman who warmly smiled and gestured for him to come inside. The restaurant was primarily frequented by affluent individuals, and Dmitri, more than anyone else, fit into that category. He was a prominent businessman with a large staff under his command. Additionally, he had gained recognition as a patron of the arts, regularly making donations to hospitals and various educational institutions. In general, he spared no expense when it came to philanthropy. Once inside, his gaze searched for the administrator, but he was immediately drawn to two impressive women. Dmitri was tall and broad-shouldered, and his demeanor betrayed his past. He walked as if he were marching on a parade ground, indicating his previous affiliation with the armed forces. At the very least, he had served in the military, and perhaps even participated in combat, possibly as a contractor. Dmitri had come to the restaurant to celebrate an important event and needed to ensure that no one would disturb him. Spotting the administrator with his gaze, he approached him and greeted, "Good day, my name is Dmitri, and I would like to place an order." "Yes, good day," the administrator replied. "What would you like to order?" "You see, I've decided to organize a meeting," Dmitri began to explain, "and it's important to me that we're not interrupted. In short, the restaurant needs to be closed for the entire day." "All right, I understand," nodded the administrator. "We can dedicate the entire space to you. Let's go to my office and discuss the details there." "Great, that's what I need," agreed Dmitri. Noticing the name Valentin on the administrator's badge, he said, "Dmitri, I don't see your patronymic. Please excuse me." "No problem," Valentin waved his hand. "You can just call me Valentin." In his office, they finalized the date, time, and specific menu for the event. Dmitri didn't hesitate to be generous and fully paid for the order instead of just 50%. Valentin appeared responsible and serious, so Dmitri had no issues handing over the money, carefully counting the bills. Valentin took a nervous breath and whispered, "I see that you're a very generous person, but this is more than necessary." Dmitri Makarov entered the Medusa restaurant, surveying the atmosphere and the patrons with his gaze. He was interested in the crowd at this establishment. Shrugging his shoulders, he stepped out of his SUV and headed towards the glass entrance doors. Standing nearby was a doorman who greeted him with a friendly smile and a gesture to come inside. The restaurant attracted wealthy visitors, and Dmitri fit perfectly into that category. He was a prominent businessman with a large team of employees under his command. Furthermore, he was known for his philanthropy. He frequently made generous donations to hospitals and educational institutions. In short, he spared no expense when it came to charitable causes. Once inside, his eyes were drawn to two remarkable women. Dmitri was tall and broad-shouldered, and his confident stride revealed his military background. He walked as if he were on a parade ground, indicating a close connection with the armed forces. He had served in the army, and perhaps even participated in combat, possibly as a contractor. Dmitri had come to the restaurant to mark an important occasion, and it was crucial to him that nothing disturbed his plans. He located the administrator with his gaze and approached him, greeting, "Good day. My name is Dmitri, and I would like to place an order." "Good day," the administrator replied. "What would you like to order?" "It's important to me that the service is top-notch," Dmitri continued. "I expect the organization to be of the highest standard. I know that your restaurant prioritizes service quality." The administrator, hearing such a request, felt the significance of the moment and responded, "We guarantee that the service will be at the highest level. You can rest assured that we will meet all your requirements." Dmitri smiled, appreciating the administrator's decisive answer. "Excellent. I appreciate your professionalism. Well, it seems we've discussed all the details. I should be on my way now. Don't let me keep you." "Of course," replied Valentin, the restaurant administrator. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Dmitri. If you have any further questions or requests, don't hesitate to contact me." Dmitri shook his hand in gratitude and headed towards the exit. However, when he reached the door, he suddenly paused. Looking towards the bar counter, he noticed a familiar figure. It was a cleaning lady who caught his attention. She had just come out of the utility room, holding a bucket of water and a mop. The cleaning lady appeared slightly older than her years, and her clothes were worn and modest. Dmitri remembered her from the past, from distant events. Dmitri glanced at her, and their eyes met for a moment. The woman, startled by the sudden gaze, nearly dropped the bucket she was carrying. A nearby waitress quickly caught it. The cleaning lady tried to apologize, but Dmitri didn't allow her to do so. He turned around and hastily left the restaurant, bidding Valentin farewell on the way. Valentin noticed Dmitri's displeased look at the cleaning lady and became curious about what had happened between them. However, he decided not to ask and leave things as they were. After a few minutes, Dmitri opened his eyes and started his car, heading home. However, at the first intersection, a powerful wave of memories washed over him, as if he had delved into the past to understand the essence of the present. The first thing that came to his mind was the orphanage where he spent his entire childhood. Dmitri ended up there after his parents nearly caused their own demise. They often drank, and one day they started a fire in their house, managing to escape themselves but forgetting about their son. Fortunately, firefighters arrived in time and rescued the boy. He suffered burns, but they weren't fatal, and everything healed within a few days. However, his parents were found guilty of starting the fire and were deprived of their parental rights. That's how Dmitri ended up in the orphanage, where he found new friends and mentors. The caregivers did their best to make him feel less lonely. While he was an average student, without any fanaticism, he loved physical education and military affairs. He could spend hours on the parallel bars, climbing trees, jumping from high obstacles, and participating in distance races. He trained and molded himself into a strong and resilient man. Interestingly, neither the caregivers nor the teachers tried to discourage him. On the contrary, they praised him for his dedication to sports. However, they still made him focus on his studies, even if it meant achieving average grades in other subjects. Leaving the walls of the orphanage, Dmitri was able to enter university through distance learning. Former school teachers were even surprised that he passed the entrance exams. It seemed they didn't know their former student well, and he proved to them that sports didn't hinder his development in the right direction. Moreover, the distance learning program allowed Dmitri to work part-time. He realized that money wouldn't fall from the sky, and he had to make his own way in life. At work, his neighbor Vasily helped him by offering a job as a loader at a grocery warehouse, just a 5-minute walk from the home he received as a former orphanage resident. In general, he had all the conditions to earn money, pursue education, and establish his life. After some time, he met Nina. Dmitri encountered her in a club where he had come to have some fun. The girl attracted him not only with her appearance, but also with her down-to-earth manners. She didn't show off like some girls in the club and didn't hold her head high. Dmitri, without hesitation, invited Nina to dance, and they danced together multiple times for almost 3 hours. They didn't dance in the center of the hall. He treated Nina to cocktails and dessert, which she enjoyed, and she confessed that she had never met a gentleman in such a place before. During their conversation, Dmitri learned that Nina was the daughter of wealthy parents. She mentioned her father's surname, and everything fell into place. It turned out that her father, Andrei Nikolaevich Sfortsov, was considered the best surgeon in the city. Moreover, he worked in a private clinic, earning a significant income. Her mother, Tatiana Antonovna, was also successful, heading the main department of the tax inspection. On the other hand, this didn't disturb or intimidate Dmitri in any way. He wasn't chasing money, and certainly that wasn't why he met Nina. He liked her primarily as a person. At the same time, Nina didn't feel any aversion when Dmitri told her that he was a former orphan, and his parents were alcoholics who had long been deprived of their parental rights. This circumstance didn't affect their acquaintance either, and after exchanging phone numbers, the young couple started dating. Naturally, Nina's parents soon found out about it and called her for a frank conversation. "Are you out of your mind, dating a poor beggar?" her mother exclaimed. "I don't see anything wrong with it," her daughter objected. "I like him and I feel good with him." "Of course, who would doubt that?" her mother shrugged. "Mom, you're speaking ill of him for no reason." Dmitri stood his ground. "Don't shout at your mother." "You've barely wiped the milk off your lips," her father intervened. "For example, I didn't rush into relationships with girls. I studied to stand firmly on my own feet in the future. If we listened to you, I should become a monk right away," Nina replied tearfully. "What are you saying, daughter? Dad didn't mean that at all." Tatiana Antonovna tried to rehabilitate her husband. "We just want you to take your time, especially since you have your whole life ahead of you." "Exactly, that's what lies ahead," Nina nodded. "And I want to spend it in a way that I won't regret wasting years aimlessly." "So you mean to say that I intervened in the conversation again, father?" "Yes, calm down already." "She didn't mean to say anything," her mother replied in her place. "Isn't that right, daughter?" With a sad head hung low, Nina said, "But you have to understand, I won't give up on Dima." "Fine, let's leave it for now," her mother agreed. "Continue dating, just remember that a happy future awaits you." "I understand," Nina nodded. "Dad, I still won't become as accomplished a doctor as you. So let's settle for the fact that your daughter will study to become an economist." "What should I do with you two while I'm alone?" Andrei Nikolaevich responded with frustration in his voice. Since her mother had decided that she would follow in her footsteps, I'll have to accept it. Nina was glad that her parents accepted her position regarding Dmitri, but at the same time, she became suspicious. They agreed too quickly, and knowing her father and mother well, she assumed they had some backup plan. Clearly, they wouldn't use it against their daughter. But her boyfriend could easily become the target. That's why she refused to meet at her home and introduce him to her parents. In such a tense rhythm, half a year flew by unnoticed. Nina and Dmitri thoroughly tested their feelings and even started making plans for the future. They couldn't see anything else but getting married. Meanwhile, Nina's parents, upon learning about their daughter's plans, were furious. However, this time they didn't call her for a frank conversation. They were satisfied with their previous discussion. When Nina was on the verge of losing her temper, Tatiana Antonovna, who loved her daughter too much to test her nerves, delegated the problem with Dmitri to her husband. "You need to figure something out with him," Tatiana ordered in a commanding tone. "I don't even know where to start," her spouse shrugged. "Think about it, you have a clever mind," Tatiana replied, gently stroking his wild hair. "Fine, I'll try, but I can't promise anything," her husband nodded. It was clear from the beginning that her parents didn't approve of her relationship with the poor Dmitri. They were bothered by the potential gossip and finger-pointing from acquaintances and friends. Moreover, they didn't want to be related to a simple loader, especially the son of alcoholics. No, the wealthy couldn't allow such disgrace, so there was a need to separate Dmitri from Nina. But interestingly enough, their daughter didn't plan to back down. She constantly showed her strong-willed character and demanded that her parents respect her opinion. One could say that after that conversation, Nina regained her spirit and decided that she could get away with a lot in this war. That's why she elevated her relationship with her beloved to the status of a potential family. Painting pictures of a big and cozy home, lots of children she didn't even. She suspected that her parents were preparing something, and in the end, her father didn't come up with anything clever. How to draft Dmitri into the military. With the doctor's connections to former patients in town, there was more than enough, and the head of the draft board agreed to help, albeit for a small fee. You understand, Andrei, I'm also taking a risk, the draft board officer whispered as he counted the money. Don't worry, it's one more student, one less student. What's the difference? Instead of the university, he'll serve the motherland. The fact that it exists is the law, and I'm breaking it, the draft board officer continued with excitement. Yes, everything will be fine, Sergei, don't worry, Andrei Nikolaevich said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Take some more money just in case you have to bribe someone. Gathering a bunch of cash received from the surgeon, the draft board officer prepared the necessary documents, and soon Dmitri was called up to the army. He, of course, was bewildered because he was entitled to a deferment by law. However, he didn't try to evade it, let alone feign illness. Dmitri Stoyko accepted the call of fate, knowing that he, like many men in the country, had a duty to serve. The draft board deemed him fit for military service. Naturally, Nina found out about it. She simply couldn't believe her eyes when Dmitri showed her the call-up notice and assignment. So, what do we do now? She asked with a trembling voice. We wait for him, just wait, Dmitri answered cheerfully and casually. After all, they accepted me into the airborne troops, which is cool. I'm happy for you, as unsure as you are, Nina said. But it just happened so suddenly. It's all right, I'll serve and come back. Dmitri tried to reassure her. I'm not going there for a lifetime. That's true, Nina nodded, and she hugged him tightly. She promised to wait, no matter what. Dmitri assured her that he would only think of her. That night, the young couple hardly slept. They had a lot to talk about and discuss, especially since Dmitri would soon depart. They vowed to remain loyal to each other, especially Nina, and agreed that they would endure any hardships, and then get married and become husband and wife. The next day, Dmitri left for the recruitment center, and Nina was left waiting. Together with several other conscripts, they were sent to their unit. From the first day of his stay, Dmitri fell in love with this branch of the military. He had always dreamed of joining the airborne troops, and now fate had given him such a unique opportunity. Naturally, he didn't want to let it slip away and started showing excellent results. One of the officers was impressed with Dmitri and said, "You're doing great," almost like a fully trained soldier. The assessment of his abilities inspired Dmitri, and he began training even more intensively. He was one of the few who could withstand all the challenges. Almost every exercise involved grueling marches, jumps, and rigorous physical training. For the other recruits, it was routine, but for Dmitri and his comrades from civilian life, these training sessions became a real challenge. Dmitri truly became part of the elite armed forces, and he appreciated the guidance and knowledge imparted to him by his higher-ranking officers and experienced soldiers. Unlike some other conscripts, Dmitri didn't give up or lose hope. Together with like-minded individuals who could endure all the trials, they formed a sort of team. In fact, Dmitri gathered around him only resilient and brave people, just like himself. He easily adapted to army life because he wasn't afraid of hardships. Since childhood, he knew what military service entailed, especially in the airborne troops. Leafing through history textbooks and specialized books, he marveled at the examples of courage and bravery for which this branch of the military was renowned. Initially, Nina wrote letters and even called him. It warmed his soul and heart. He was happy to receive any message or conversation because it inspired him and set a positive tone. One day, as Dmitri was reading a message from Nina and smiling warmly, an officer approached him. "I can see you're on cloud 9, he commented. Dmitri apologized and stood up from his bed, adjusting his collar. The officer reassured him, saying, "Oh, come on, sit down. Everything's fine. It's good to have someone to write to and talk with." He also told Dmitri to address him simply as Nikolay, but to follow the proper protocol when communicating with others. Dmitri nodded and thanked the officer, who then left. Outwardly, he was just an ordinary officer, but if one looked deeper, they could see the wounds that scared his heart. He carefully concealed it, not letting anyone see how heavy it weighed on him. He had a girlfriend with whom he even lived in a common-law marriage. But after he signed the contract, she left, unwilling to continue living with someone who had decided to dedicate himself to the armed forces. And one could understand her because most likely, she dreamed of a great love somewhere in a peaceful and cozy place, while her beloved offered a life of rigorous military routine and constant challenges. So she turned away, refusing such a future. Nikolay didn't blame her for it. After all, he had set the precedent himself. At the same time, he concluded that he had made the right decision. Military service and training the recruits allowed him to channel all his energy into noble pursuits. Meanwhile, the training sessions distracted him from dark thoughts. But ordinary human joys were not foreign to Nikolay either. That's why he smiled when he saw Dmitri immersed in correspondence with his beloved. At least someone was happy, despite the hardships of army life. This continued for about 2 months, and then it seemed like someone had replaced Nina. She called less frequently, and whenever she did, Dmitri could hear a gloomy and constrained voice. It saddened him and led to melancholic reflections, but he tried not to show it and continued smiling, creating the image of a happy person. Even Nikolay didn't notice anything. Some more time passed, and Nina stopped writing. It seemed like something had happened to her. However, Dmitri couldn't find out what it was related to. His beloved minimized their communication, replied with monosyllabic answers, and sometimes didn't respond at all, which only deepened his suspicions. Dmitri couldn't bear it and wrote in one of his letters, "We swore to be faithful to each other and become husband and wife." Nina didn't respond to this cry from his soul. She simply didn't write anything and didn't send it. Dmitri felt jealous, although he didn't yet understand whom or why. At the same time, he wasn't far from the truth. If he knew what was really happening with his beloved, his hair would stand on end. Setting aside all their promises and vows to each other, Nina didn't lead a vibrant and fulfilling life. She didn't become a lonely kitten waiting for her beloved. The forced separation became a call to action for her. She attended discos, clubs, and various movie premieres. She enjoyed it because she could spend all her time on her own pleasure. Dmitri, on the other hand, wasn't a fervent fan of these events and increasingly disappeared into the gym. So you finally arrived, his beloved. It could be said that she found a real chance to indulge in all the pleasures without any cost. At one of the college parties, Nina met a handsome guy who became her lover. And she was the son of wealthy parents. No matter what anyone says, she was just lucky to grab fate by the beard. She lived in luxury, and she found a moneyed man who fell head over heels in love with her. Naturally, she didn't mention anything about Dmitri to him, so as not to scare away her good fortune. And he also made an effort to show his feelings, showering Nina with expensive gifts, talking about trips and the sweet life. He definitely impressed her parents. Tatiana Antonovna, upon seeing her daughter's new boyfriend for the first time, was impressed. He not only looked handsome, but also displayed ease and elegance in his manners. Nina invited him over to her place, where the guy fully revealed himself and advertised his qualities. Nina's mother caught onto this vibe and cautiously asked, "What are your plans regarding our daughter, Oleg?" The guy replied that he had very serious intentions toward Nina. Tatiana Antonovna felt a sense of trust and joined the conversation, saying she hoped everything would work out and their daughter would be happy. Surprisingly, neither of them remembered Dmitri at that moment. It seemed like he ceased to exist for these people. But the most sad and horrible part was that Nina completely denied the possibility of crossing out everything that had connected them in the past. She detached herself from their previous relationship and was now enthralled by this wealthy lover. He promised her a heavenly paradise. Unbeknownst to herself, Nina became enamored with this guy and temporarily forgot about the person waiting for her somewhere in the military unit, eagerly anticipating her letters and calls. Dmitri hoped that his girlfriend was simply going through a phase of depression, which is why she stopped writing. He thought she would soon rectify everything and reach out. But time passed and his beloved didn't respond. So he decided to call her himself, determined and eager to clarify their relationship. However, no one answered his call. He was simply ignored, and Nina even added his number to the block list. This was the last straw for Dmitri. He was shocked by his girlfriend's behavior and, picking the right moment, decided to escape from the military unit. He almost succeeded unnoticed, climbing over the fence and heading towards home. All his hopes were to see Nina as soon as possible, but it didn't work out. His disappearance was discovered in the unit, and the search began, with Nikolay participating in it. Nikolay wanted to find Dmitri personally, to look him straight in the eyes. When they met, Nikolay angrily said, "I have been watching over you, helping you all this time, and this is how you repay me." Dmitri resisted during the arrest and sustained injuries, but he was to blame himself for not voluntarily complying with the military police's demands. In the end, an officer shouted, "Comrade Lieutenant," and drove him away in the service UAZ vehicle. The lieutenant didn't stand up for Dmitri, and he was sent to the disciplinary battalion, a place that could only be described as the most horrifying. It was there that he experienced all the horrors of life one could encounter in a disciplinary unit. Dmitri didn't just atone for his guilt, he survived as best he could. The conditions of service were unbearable, but he endured all the hardships. After all, on his journey, he found himself in such a deadlock where no messages from her came. Nina stopped writing, let alone calling. In the disciplinary battalion, there were no concessions. On the contrary, anyone who ended up there was treated like demons and not given the opportunity to even think about resting. Dmitri was torn apart, trying to hold himself together and not give in. Because he couldn't help but understand that the only thing waiting for him beyond this was prison. Therefore, until the very end, he suppressed the urges to run away. And soon, rumors reached him that Nina had gotten married. The cup of patience didn't just overflow, it spilled over. Dmitri barely remembered what happened to him afterward. He only saw that some unknown force pushed him into the armory to settle the score with his life. It was hard to imagine what he was thinking in that moment. It seemed like his feelings for her didn't cloud his reason. Dmitri lost control of himself and almost paid for it with his own life, but luck turned around and sent him salvation in the form of a fellow soldier. Jaeger was also serving a disciplinary sentence for insubordination. Just in the nick of time, he managed to snatch the weapon from Dmitri and return it to its place, pinning the guy down. Jaeger took him to his cell and began berating him. "What the hell are you thinking? Have you gone completely mad?" "Yes," and then followed a whole tirade of profanity. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize what I was doing," Dmitri almost cried. "Calm down, you hear me?" Jaeger shook him. "We've all been through this. Trust me, and take off those rose-colored glasses already. It's like you're in a different world. I understand it's hard for you, but that's the fate of every soldier." "Yes, you're right. I apologize," Dmitri nodded, standing up from the floor. "I almost made an irreparable mistake." It was only thanks to his comrade that he stayed alive and managed to endure until the end in the disciplinary battalion. The only thing he still had to go through was healing his emotional wounds and transitioning back to civilian life. During his time there, Dmitri began studying all aspects of running his own business, despite the harsh conditions. He was allowed to pursue self-education, and Dmitri took full advantage of it, preparing himself diligently for a new life. Even then, the guilt of blindly believing in pure love had not left him. Dmitri couldn't believe that Nina had simply crossed out everything that existed between them. He imagined her living with her new husband, uttering affectionate words to him. Such visualization twisted his insides, and he had to work hard to forget. Upon returning to civilian life, Dmitri first made contact with those he hadn't seen in a long time. He called all his friends and acquaintances to let them know. He relied heavily on their support, especially considering the difficulties he had to overcome after his impulsive actions. During this time, rumors spread that Nina had moved to another city. It was also said that she had a child, and it seemed like everything was going well for her. However, Dmitri didn't dare visit her parents. Although they continued to live at the same address, everything around reminded him of unpleasant memories. Dmitri shrugged off the past and decided to focus on his business. He had serious aspirations to rise and become a successful individual. Following the advice of an old friend, he chose the construction industry. Residential construction was booming at the time, and Dmitri decided to get involved. Initially, he started as a regular concrete worker to learn the ropes and understand the process. Although it took time, Dmitri was not one to give up halfway, so he persevered. He saw great potential in it. Gradually, with accumulated experience in various construction tasks, Dmitri decided to assemble his own team. It didn't happen overnight, but he managed to find skilled specialists. Over time, his team consisted of individuals who were passionate about their work and completely devoted to Dmitri. With the arrival of major contracts, the business gradually expanded. Dmitri personally visited and negotiated with the necessary people. One day, he even encountered a criminal authority. However, it turned out that the authorities simply wanted an extravagant sauna to be built. They met at a restaurant where Petr Sergeyevich invited him to discuss the details. The authorities stated, "You see, I'm doing everything for my family." Dmitri understood that the authority was telling the truth, and they agreed on a luxurious sauna with unique features. Petr Sergeyevich eased Dmitri's worries by saying, "Stop shaking. I'm not such a terrible person." Dmitri understood that the authority wanted to convey that everyone knew him, and he supervised most of the construction projects, through which significant amounts of money flowed. Even the mayor conducted business with him because he benefited from it. After receiving the lucrative contract from Petr Sergeyevich, Dmitri went to the office and organized the teams, assigning each one their tasks for the next month and a half. As agreed, the sauna was built, and they celebrated the completion. Petr Sergeyevich invited not only his friends, but also Dmitri. It was the first time Dmitri found himself in the company of the criminal community. On the other hand, they didn't seem frightening to him. They were ordinary businessmen, albeit with a dark past, and all the stories about the return of the 90s had nothing to do with them. In them, Dmitri found a powerful force of support. They also facilitated his further advancement in the business. Soon, Dmitri established his own company and named it Life of the Future. He took on any construction and renovation projects and gained regular clients in the housing construction sector. Petr Sergeyevich played a significant role in this, periodically providing Dmitri with profitable projects, and together they formed a good partnership. But the time had come to expand once again, and Dmitri turned to Petr Sergeyevich for help. He needed to hire more employees for his construction team. While some were already recruited, more workers were needed. In the evening, he arrived at the authorities' house, and his security allowed him in upon Petr Sergeyevich's warning. Petr Sergeyevich was sitting in the gazebo, drinking grape juice. "Ah, Dimka, come in," he gestured for him to sit beside him. "Good evening, Petr Sergeyevich. I'm here to discuss something with you," Dmitri said as soon as he entered. "Oh, always about business," the authority laughed. "Let's have some barbecue instead. My guys will bring it right away." And indeed, a few minutes later, a large dish with big pieces of grilled meat appeared on the table in the gazebo. They also brought a salad in a bowl and some other snacks. And most importantly, they poured glasses of 5-year-old wine. Petr Sergeyevich raised a toast to health, prosperity, and those who were no longer with them. He downed his glass in one gulp. "I agree," Dmitri replied, taking a sharp breath and emptying his glass as well. Immediately, they began enjoying the barbecue with satisfied smiles and joyful exclamations, savoring the taste of the grilled meat. It was the first time Dmitri had tasted such delicious barbecue. He had eaten before, but it couldn't compare to what he experienced as a guest at Petr Sergeyevich's place. One could immediately sense the touch of a professional chef, and later it turned out that a true Caucasian prepared the meat. "So what were you saying about business?" the authority asked after they finished their portion of barbecue. "I've decided to expand, and I need employees," Dmitri cautiously began. "I understand. You want to have assistants but are afraid of hiring unreliable people." Petr Sergeyevich nodded. "I understand you perfectly, as I've been through it many times myself. Just look at who surrounds me. These people have stood the test of time, and I'm safe with them." "Yes, your gaze says it all," Dmitri replied. "I'm still learning. That's why I need your help to find truly worthy people," he continued. "All right, I'll help you," Petr Sergeyevich agreed, and as he finished his last words, a little girl named Anna came running into the gazebo. She quickly climbed onto his lap and began tugging at his shirt. Petr Sergeyevich lowered his head, looked at her, and smiled. In his eyes, there was an ocean of kindness and tenderness, and one couldn't tell that he was a criminal authority. He resembled an ordinary family man more than anything else. "My granddaughter, Lizanka," Petr Sergeyevich said, nodding towards the girl. "She's a beautiful girl, hard to take your eyes off," Dmitri replied with a smile. "That's exactly why she deserves to live like a regular human being," the host said thoughtfully. "As for your request, I have a friend who owns a personnel agency. Reach out to him and he'll help you." Petr Sergeyevich took out a notepad, tore out a sheet, and wrote down the agency's address and contact number. "That's what I was talking about when I mentioned a peaceful life," Petr Sergeyevich said. "I'll call Artem and let him know you're coming. And don't worry, he'll find you reliable people you can rely on completely." "Thank you, Petr Sergeyevich," Dmitri thanked him. "You're doing so much for me. I don't know how to repay you." "No need for that." The authority waved his hand. The important thing is to build with passion, so people will be happy and remember you with gratitude. You can be certain of that, Dmitri replied, blushing. I closely monitor the materials used and who does what, and I believe, Dinka, Petr Sergeyevich stopped him. In any case, don't delay and go to Artem on the same day. Dmitri called him and arranged a meeting. Artem was considered one of the best specialists in personnel policy in the city. They even entrusted him with hiring people at the factory, something that had never happened before. It was because he handled it successfully, and there were hardly any complaints about the workers sent to the factories. Dmitri visited the agency and met with Artem, who treated him to a delicious coffee. Artem provided a list of people whom Dmitri could work with without worrying about debts or problems. Dmitri carefully studied the list and selected 10 individuals, enough for the initial phase of his work. He also planned to reach out to Artem again in the future when his company grew. They quickly found common ground. Step by step, Dmitri moved closer to his goal and strengthened his company's position. Petr Sergeyevich continued to help because he was also interested in ensuring that construction didn't stop and money kept flowing into the city. One could say there was a mutually beneficial arrangement where everyone got what they wanted. Dmitri had steady orders, and Petr Sergeyevich basked in the rays of unwavering authority. The employees they managed to hire on the first try became the backbone of the company. Dmitri trusted them as he trusted himself because he knew they wouldn't let him down, and their work spoke for itself. The company entered the top 5 in the region in terms of construction volume. Dmitri was busy calculating profits and reporting to Petr Sergeyevich. They had an informal agreement on the division of spheres of influence and authority. 2 years later, the company's staff had tripled, and Dmitri finally became a millionaire. He threw himself into full gear and fearlessly took on orders that many competitors refused due to the fear of dealing with criminal clients. They were scared of getting into trouble if things didn't go according to plan, but only Dmitri felt completely protected. Petr Sergeyevich not only provided him with profits, but also ensured protection for the company. No one dared to approach Dmitri. Everyone in the area knew who he was working with. After some time, he built a luxurious country house, interestingly enough, next to the authority figure, so they could see each other more often. Sometimes he even considered him his second father, who gave him a chance to survive and become a successful person. That's what Dmitri had dreamed of when he was preparing to return to civilian life from the disciplinary battalion. It didn't happen immediately, but after some time, he achieved it, and now all that was left was not to lose what he had created. The company continued to expand, and soon there was an opportunity to open branches in other cities. Dmitri discussed this direction with Petr Sergeyevich, who promised support. 7 years passed, and during this time, the former paratrooper had fully established himself as a construction magnate. The mayor of the city and the governor of the region often visited him. These people considered Dmitri their own and inadvertently created an image of an all-powerful businessman with whom one not only could but also should deal. And soon, Petr Sergeyevich fulfilled his dream. He distanced himself from criminal structures and dedicated himself entirely to his family. While contemplating this, Petr Sergeyevich also thought about helping Dmitri in his personal life. After all these years, Dmitri still hadn't married, although he had had romances with women. However, they all ended the same way. A few days of dating, luxurious restaurants, gifts, and then a breakup. For some reason, Dmitri didn't take any initiative in this regard. It seemed like he was afraid of something. At the same time, he had no intention of sharing his personal life problems with anyone, not even Petr Sergeyevich. The businessman didn't know what was going on in Dmitry's mind, and it was difficult to say whether it was his first love that haunted him or something else. Dmitry kept his inner worries to himself. On the other hand, Nana no longer interested him, or rather, her fate didn't. Over the years, he had cleansed himself of anger and hatred towards that person, and even if her name resurfaced, it always brought a smile. In this manner, Dmitry lived his life without thinking about getting married or starting a family. And then, unexpectedly, he encountered his first love in the guise of an ordinary assistant worker. Dmitry planned to arrange a meeting with his former comrades at a restaurant. Not only those who stood shoulder to shoulder with him during the hardships of military service, but also those who supported him in the disciplinary battalion. And of course, he invited Yegor first. Yegor gladly accepted when Dmitry called him. "Of course, I'll come. You're like a brother to me. It's great. I'm just glad you agreed," he thanked Dmitry. "How could I refuse?" exclaimed Yegor. "I never forgot about you since then. But you rarely make yourself known." "Sorry, brother, I'm spinning like a squirrel in a wheel," Dmitry sincerely replied, without trying to justify himself. "I started a business, and money started pouring in." In addition to his former comrades, Dmitry invited Petr Sergeyevich to the restaurant, along with his close friends. He wanted to organize a grand feast that would be remembered for a long time. And now, all day, Nina wouldn't leave his mind. He never expected to meet her under these circumstances, and after so many years. He had even forgotten she existed in this world, but she reminded him, albeit accidentally, and it didn't make things easier for Dmitry. During the height of the feast, when everyone had already indulged and discussed pressing matters, Dmitry suddenly stood up and approached the bar counter. Valentin Petrovich, the event manager, was observing everything from there. Seeing the client approaching, he greeted him with a smile. "If you need anything, I'm at your service." "Yes, I would like to see the cleaning lady who worked on the day I placed the order," Dmitry nodded. "All right, no problem. I'll call her," the manager mumbled and disappeared behind a black door. 2 minutes later, he reappeared, accompanied by the cleaning lady. Nina walked slightly hunched over, as if carrying a bag of cement on her shoulders. Lifting her head, she locked eyes with Dmitry and asked softly, "What is it this time?" "Oh, nothing much. Just wanted to chat," Dmitry shrugged. "And what about?" Nina asked disinterestedly. "What have you been up to all these years? How have you been?" He started listing uncertainly. "Are you really interested in that?" Nina smiled skeptically. "Very interested, and I don't hold any grudges against you," Dmitry concluded. "Let's sit down. Valentin Petrovich will bring us new utensils. I said everything correctly, didn't I?" "Of course, everything will be ready in no time," the manager babbled, understanding that Dmitry was addressing him. 5 minutes later, new plates and wine glasses were placed on the table. Nina declined, but she gladly took a sip of juice, waiting for her to finish eating a little. Dmitry asked again, "So what happened in your life?" "Now you're a cleaner, is that how fate punished me?" Nina sadly replied. "Well, fate has its ways. Can you tell me more?" Dmitry was interested not only in her new social status, but also in what had happened to her. And Nina began to tell her story, but not in great detail to make him uncomfortable. It turned out that her father had died from a stroke just 6 months before his anniversary. His work had likely exhausted him, but the constant stress from Tatiana Antonovna didn't give him any peace, demanding more and more money. So he had to go to great lengths as a top surgeon to satisfy her whims. Her father's death left a heavy imprint on Nina's soul, and she struggled to come to terms with the fact that he was no longer there. Even her relationship with Oleg couldn't help, although they were husband and wife. And soon, her mother began displaying behaviors characterized by recklessness. Tatiana Antonovna developed an addiction to alcohol and consumed it at every convenient opportunity, whether there was a reason or not. She couldn't see reason, and no amount of pleading could change that. They even had to turn to a narcologist to treat her mother. But once her mother sensed Nina's control over her, she spiraled out of control. Tatiana Antonovna started drinking even more and eventually ended up in a psychiatric clinic, where she died from a heart failure. Another blow completely shattered Nina, both emotionally and physically. Dmitri shook his head and pushed an ice cream container towards her. "Have some, you look worn out," he said. "Thank you, but I don't feel like it." Nina shook her head. "It's tough," Dmitri agreed. "When loved ones succumb to addiction, my parents. Abuse is terrible, but I'm glad I wanted to talk. In other circumstances, I remember about the orphanage." Nina nodded. "And what about your husband?" Dmitri inquired. "You know all about that too." She sadly lowered her head. "I didn't want to talk about my husband, but since I've started, I have to touch upon this painful subject," Nina said. "So Oleg turned out to be a womanizer. At first, he didn't show any signs in that direction, pretending to be a faithful family man, but after some time, he started going astray. And later, Nina began to notice how her husband lingered at work. He often smelled of women's perfume, and the most shocking fact was that Oleg developed an addiction to illegal drugs. Nina once found strange pills in his pocket. She had an acquaintance in the laboratory, and she took the find to her, and after testing, it was revealed that they were. Of course, a scandal erupted against this background. However, Oleg didn't want to hear anything. He claimed that someone had planted them on him and that they couldn't seriously argue with him. Nina was close to giving birth, and the added stress could only harm her. In the end, their arguments led nowhere and achieved no results. Oleg waited a few days and then started seeing other women and taking drugs again. Nina shrugged it off and didn't bother to confront him. And after giving birth to their son, Oleg abandoned her completely, moving in with his mistress for good. Left alone, Nina struggled to earn enough money for food and shelter. Before that, her parents had helped, and she had the support of her mother and father. But all the good things came to an end, and now she had to rely solely on her own strength. Nina was on the verge of losing her mind, trying to make ends meet. "I'm sorry, I didn't know any of this, unfortunately," Dmitri said. "No, it's me who should apologize for causing you pain back then," Nina replied, placing her hand on his shoulder. "I feel like you're not telling me everything about your son," Dmitri said, looking deeply into her eyes, holding her hand in his. "He's sick, seriously sick," Nina said, tilting her head and speaking through tears. "He has a heart defect, and we need money for the operation, but I simply don't have it." Unable to hold back, she burst into tears, and now no amount of ice cream could calm her down. Summoning the administrator, Dmitri asked him to buy a sedative from the pharmacy. The administrator rushed off to fulfill the request, receiving a generous tip. Meanwhile, Petr Sergeyevich approached their table and asked what was happening. Dmitri had to briefly retell his past. After listening to the whole story, Petr Sergeyevich let out a heavy sigh and said, "I won't lecture anyone now. It's not the right moment. The most important thing is to save the child's life." On the same day, Nina's son, whom she named Dima, was hospitalized in a private clinic. The millionaire took care of all the expenses, but Petr Sergeyevich didn't stay idle either and used his connections. As a result, the best specialists from the Federal Center were brought in. They conducted an examination and prepared the boy for surgery. Realizing that the mother would be worried sick, Dmitri made arrangements with the administrator, and he applied for unplanned leave. She practically lived in the hospital while her son was there. The doctors did everything they could, and the operation was successful. Dima was freed from the problem that threatened his life. Nina didn't know how to thank Dmitri for such a generous gift, but he didn't want to hear anything about it. "Don't worry, I did what I had to do," he said as they sat in the hospital room. "The important thing is that nothing threatens my namesake anymore. You have such a beautiful, strong son, and he will definitely recover." However, unexpectedly, the doctors announced that a blood transfusion was required. Naturally, Nana offered herself as a donor. At the same time, Dmitri asked to have his blood tested. The medical team conducted the analysis, and it turned out that Nina's son and Dmitri were almost identical in terms of their genetic makeup. An immediate DNA test was ordered, which confirmed their relationship. It turned out that Dmitri had saved his own son, whom he knew nothing about. And an unreasonable question arose in his mind. "Why didn't you say anything?" Nina replied, crying, "I'm sorry. I didn't even know myself." "It's okay. Don't get upset. I just asked," Dmitri reassured her. "I understand. You didn't know whose child it was, so you didn't tell me." Nana nodded, "But thank you anyway for paying for the operation and donating blood. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been possible. He's my son." Dmitri exclaimed joyfully and hugged the boy. At first, the child didn't understand what was happening, but when his mother explained it to him, Dima burst into tears. He hugged his father tightly and whispered, "Daddy, Daddy, I knew you would find me, my little son. I'm so happy to have you." Dmitri overcame himself and forgave Nina for her past mistakes. Petr Sergeyevich supported him, and after some time, he took Nina home from the restaurant. Naturally, she left her cleaning job behind. She no longer needed to scrub floors to earn a living. Dmitri said that they had a lot to realize and accept, but the most important thing was to raise their son so he would be healthy and in need of nothing. And he cautiously brought up the topic of giving him a brother or sister, to which Nina happily smiled. If you enjoyed the story, please support me with a thumbs up button. It's just one action for you, but it means a lot to me. All the best.